Ha, Mr. Zuckerberg, does God exist? The crowd inside the Harvard lecture hall moved like a giant organism, a hum of voices, glowing smartphone screens, flashing cameras. The conference was already half an hour old, and on stage behind a massive table sat the man everyone had come to see, Mark Zuckerberg. Today, he was not just a businessman. He was a guru, a visionary, someone who was building a new world, a new reality, a metaverse. His gaze remained calm and his speech clear, but a careful observer would notice something in his face betrayed fatigue. Technology has changed everything. People have become accustomed to the comfort of algorithms that know them better than they know themselves. Someone compared him to the creator of a digital god. Today, as always, he spoke about the future, about how the metaverse will be able to replace the real world, make it better, more comfortable, more ideal. But among the many hands reaching for the microphone, one stood out. "Question," the presenter said loudly, choosing a person. The microphone went to a young guy of about 20, wearing a white t-shirt and holding a laptop under his arm. His face did not express fear, but rather determination. Zuckerberg nodded, indicating that he was listening. And then the student asked a question that caused a deathly silence to fall in the room. "Mr. Zuckerberg, does God exist?" For several seconds, no one moved. No one even breathed. The question pierced everyone's consciousness like a shard of glass into their skin. The host turned his head sharply toward the guy, as if about to reprimand him for his inappropriateness. Some of the journalists were already tweeting, and some quietly laughed, as if it was a joke. But Zuckerberg didn't laugh. He blinked and looked at the student. There was no challenge in the boy's eyes, no cheap provocation. He wasn't trying to trap him, wasn't trying to make him feel uncomfortable. He just wanted to know. This is precisely why this question turned out to be so dangerous. It took Mark a second to realize that this wasn't a question that could be answered with the standard, "to each his own" response. It wasn't a question that could be easily sidestepped, like questions about the politics or ethics of artificial intelligence. He felt everything inside him tense up. But why? This is not the first time he has been asked something philosophical. People constantly want to know what the most influential people in the world think about the meaning of life, about the future of humanity. But this question was about much more than technology. It touched upon existence itself. The crowd did not move. No one was in a hurry. Mark took a deep breath, and he realized if he didn't tell the truth now, this question would haunt him forever. The deathly silence that reigned in the hall turned into something tangible. Tension hung in the air, as if before a storm. Mark looked at the guy who asked the question. The student didn't look away. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't being cocky. He wasn't trying to provoke a scandal. That was worse. The question was asked seriously. Zuckerberg felt a wave of reaction sweep through the room. Someone shifted nervously in their chair. Someone was already frantically typing messages on their phone. Journalists turned on their cameras, sensing that this moment would go down in history. He could have avoided answering. Just say something neutral, something safe. But a struggle was already beginning inside him. What answer are they expecting? If he says there is a God, he will be torn apart. The technological world is built on logic, on facts, on data. For many people, he is a symbol of the future, where faith in algorithms replaces faith in miracles. If he says yes, the next day's headlines will scream, "Zuckerberg has undermined faith in scientific progress." Meta is building a metaverse, but he himself believes in God. How could Zuckerberg betray reason? But if he says that there is no God, everything will be no less catastrophic. Half the country will see this as a challenge. Conservative circles, religious leaders, millions of people who believe in the spiritual will see him as an enemy. His words will be spread across talk shows, and he will be accused of trying to replace the Almighty with artificial intelligence. No matter how long he remained silent, this question continued to pulsate in the air. Does God exist? He cannot avoid answering. He knows it. He takes a breath and speaks. "I think this question concerns everyone, but few people dare to ask it." Mark's voice is even, no hesitation. But deep down, he feels this moment change everything. He notices how someone is clenching their hands, how the host is barely holding back the urge to intervene. But no one interrupts. Everyone is waiting. "I am not a priest or a philosopher. I am a man of technology. I have spent my entire life building systems that are based on facts. But despite this, there are questions that science has not yet answered." He notices the student's pupils dilate. "I can tell you if there is a God, but I do know one thing. In each of us, there is a need to believe in something more, something that goes beyond our logic. The question is not whether there is a God. The question is what we are looking for when we ask about it." The crowd explodes. First a roar of voices, then flashes of cameras. Somewhere in the back rows, someone shouts, "You are evading the answer! Are you afraid to tell the truth?" But Mark remains calm. He feels his question beginning to crack reality around him. He just broke the script. He just started an avalanche that can't be stopped. "Ononaka, you are evading the answer." The voice from the crowd sounded harsh, even aggressive. Mark looked in that direction, but the face of the one who shouted was already lost in the general mass. The gaze returned to the student. He did not look disappointed. Rather, he expected something more. A second wave of low humming swept through the room. The hum of voices grew louder, as if the audience was being divided into two opposing sides. Some were whispering, some were typing furiously on their phones, and some were already expressing open indignation. But Mark didn't budge. He knew this moment would come. Every word he said was recorded and broadcast live. Thousands of journalists, millions of viewers were waiting not for an explanation, but for a verdict. Now they didn't want to listen to smart arguments. They wanted to hear yes or no. "I am not evading," he said calmly. The hum died down a little, but did not disappear completely. "I said exactly what I wanted to say. It's not a question of facts. It's a question of choice. Do you choose to believe or not?" The same voice from the crowd interrupted. Zuckerberg exhaled slowly. He could try to steer the conversation toward philosophy again. He could say something abstract again. But he suddenly realized, if he did this now, he would lose. This room, these people, the whole world will see in him not a visionary, not a leader, but a man who was afraid of the truth. Was he afraid of her? No. He knew her. She just wasn't what the world wanted her to be. He leaned a little closer to the microphone, and his voice became firmer. "If you want to hear my opinion, I will give it." There was dead silence. "Yes, I believe in the existence of God." Explosion. The roar of voices grew into chaos. The presenter jerked as if he couldn't believe his ears. Journalists rushed to their keyboards, and students began shouting something, but he could no longer distinguish the words. He felt only the power of the moment. The pause lasted a few seconds, but seemed like an eternity. The first to speak was a girl in the front row, clearly a journalist. "Do you mean to say that you believe in a personal God or in some higher power?" "I don't know," Mark replied, not looking away. "But I believe there's more to it than just formulas and codes. We're building technology, but it still can't explain everything." "So you speak of God as an uncertainty?" The student again. "I speak of God as a question that is more important than any answer." The hall was again plunged into a hum. People were talking, and someone was whispering, "Did you hear that? Did he really say that? Damn it, he's crazy. What if he's right?" Zuckerberg saw the host hurriedly receiving a message from the producers. He glanced at the screen, frowned, then turned sharply to Mark. "Do you understand what effect your words will have?" Mark smiled faintly. "Do you understand why this is so important?" At that moment he realized there was no turning back. "Do you understand what effect your words will have?" The moderator's question hung in the air, but did not drown out the general chaos in the room. Mark saw how some students were whispering, others were furiously typing something into their phones, and someone just sat, shocked by what they heard. They didn't believe it. They couldn't believe that the man standing before them, the architect of the digital revolution, the engineer of the metaverse, one of the most influential people of the 21st century, had just professed faith in God. This shouldn't have happened. This couldn't happen. Mark leaned forward slightly and his voice cut through the room again. "You ask if I understand the effect? I think the effect has already begun." The host glanced nervously at the organizers. The cameras continued to film. No one had the courage to interrupt the broadcast. "Mr. Zuckerberg, let's get this straight. Did you just say you believe in God?" He could have avoided the question. He could have said that his words were distorted, that he was talking about a philosophical concept or something more. But he knew it was too late. "Yes, I believe that there is something more than science and technology. But," the host hesitated, choosing his words, "you are a man of data, facts, logic. How can you combine faith in God with your work?" Mark ran his hand across the table in front of him, as if checking how real it was. Then he looked up at the room. "Did I say that they can be combined?" At this moment, a real storm of emotions began. Some people clapped, some whistled, some jumped up from their seats. The voices mingled into a single roar. "It's PR! He's joking! Nonsense! But what if he's right?" Mark knew this moment would go down in history. Journalists were already writing headlines. "Zuckerberg, God exists." The creator of the metaverse believed in God? Harvard conference, a new revolution in worldview. In the front row, the student who had asked that very question looked straight into Mark's eyes. There was no longer any doubt in his gaze. He understood. Are you saying that faith and technology are not in conflict? His voice was firm but not hostile. Mark didn't look away. I want to say that faith is a question that technology has not yet resolved. And at that moment, a new wave of arguments spread across the room, as if he had just cracked the matrix of reality. Comments. I. Write chapter 5 using the maximum number of characters in one answer. Strictly adhere to the table of contents. Make logical transitions between chapters. Listeners should not understand that this is fiction. Do not use too long time frames, such as in 2 weeks, in a month, etc. No soft or diplomatic endings. The ending should evoke strong emotions, positive or negative. Everything should be sharp and scandalous, like on popular talk shows. The main character should always remain a positive character. Avoid logical errors and implausible moments. At the end of the chapter, do not summarize but finish it on an emotional peak. ChatGPT says, Chapter 5, Internal Conflict. Mark sat in the closed VIP area of the conference, staring at a glass of water on a glass table in front of him. The room was filled with organizers, security, and a few journalists, but he didn't notice them. What had just happened on stage was spreading around the world faster than he could comprehend. Zuckerberg admits faith in God. Meta CEO destroys self-imagination. Technology and faith, a new era or a dangerous turn? The phone never stopped ringing. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, news portals. Everything was filled with his name. He pressed the screen lock button and put the phone aside. The conference leader stood nearby, the same man who had been trying to keep the situation under control an hour earlier. Now he looked like he had been present at an earthquake. Do you even understand what you've done? Mark slowly raised his head. I told the truth. The presenter nervously ran his hand over his face. You declared to the whole country that you believe in God. Do you know what will happen now? Half the industry will turn its back on you. Scientists will attack you. Your partners will demand explanations. This is not just an interview. This is a statement that will change everything. Mark looked straight into his eyes. Is that bad? Silence. What the hell? What do you mean? Shouldn't we ask the hard questions? Shouldn't we seek answers? Why are belief in technology and belief in God considered incompatible? Can we talk about this openly? The presenter waved his hand in irritation. You know how it works. You are Zuckerberg. You are the symbol of the rational future, the metaverse, the digital world. And now you have made a statement that turns you into a new Jesus for some and a traitor to science for others. Do you seriously think that society will accept this calmly? Mark didn't answer. He knew that nothing would be calm anymore. But here's what surprised him. He didn't regret what he said. I just said what I think. I believe there is more to it than we can understand, and that the technologies we create can bring us closer to the truth, not replace it. The presenter exhaled and fell into the chair opposite, clutching his temples. Do you understand what they will make of this? People are already arguing. Social networks are exploding. Someone will say that you have changed. Someone will say that you are planning something strange. Someone will decide that this is your new marketing ploy. Mark nodded slowly. People can think whatever they want, but it won't change the truth. The presenter wanted to say something, but at that moment, one of the conference staff members ran into the room with a phone in his hand. CNN just posted a headline. Do you want to see this? Mark picked up the phone. The screen showed, is Zuckerberg hinting at a connection between God and the metaverse? A new religion for the digital world? He felt his insides tighten. They didn't understand what he was trying to say at all. Or maybe they understood, but didn't want to understand. The presenter looked at the screen and muttered, and so it begins. Mark slowly put the phone back on the table. He suddenly realized that this conversation was just beginning. Mark's phone lit up with incoming notifications again. Every news outlet had already blown his words up to the level of a world event. Zuckerberg, is technology bringing us closer to God? Meta's chapter on religion, a revolution in consciousness or a dangerous precedent? A digital prophet or an engineer with a crisis of faith? He looked at the host, who was nervously texting the organizers. Just a few minutes ago, this man was trying to control the situation. Now he was simply watching the collapse of the usual order. Mark stood up, picked up his phone, and headed towards the exit. Where are you going? The presenter called after him. I need to talk to that student. The guy who had asked the question that had changed the course of the conference was still in the room, surrounded by several people, some obviously journalists, some students. Mark walked out into the corridor and headed towards him. When the student noticed him, he froze for a second, but then nodded. The crowd parted. You probably already regret asking that question, Mark chuckled, stopping in front of him. No, the guy answered calmly, but now you seem to regret answering. Mark thought about it. He had no regrets. He said what he really thought, but the consequences unfolded too quickly. I just wanted to know the truth, the student continued. Not the one they usually tell on stage. The real one. Mark chuckled. You're not the first one to look for her. But what's interesting is, do you believe in God? The student did not answer right away. He looked away as if trying to find the right words. I don't know, he said at last, but it seems to me that the question is more important than the answer. Mark nodded. You're right. That's why it had such an effect. He looked back at the crowd that had begun to gather around them again. People were waiting. Cameras were waiting. This conversation now belonged to the world. The student looked straight into Mark's eyes. But you understand that after this, you will no longer be allowed to remain silent? Mark smiled. I never intended to remain silent. At that moment, someone shouted, Mr. Zuckerberg, does your words about faith mean that Meta is now moving in a new direction? Another voice. You want to combine religion and technology? Is this your new project? Mark turned around slowly. He felt he had to say something. The crowd froze. The student looked at him with interest. The presenter froze in the doorway of the hall, and the journalists got their cameras ready. And then Mark said something that would completely change everything. The crowd froze. Every gaze, every camera, every smartphone was directed at Mark. Journalists, students, professors, random onlookers. Everyone was waiting for his next word. The student, the one who had asked the question about God, stood opposite him, watching him with an expression of something more than mere curiosity. It was an interest in the truth. And Mark realized that this moment was the point of no return. He could have walked away. He could have said it was a misunderstanding. He could have given another standard line about Meta being just a tool and his personal beliefs not mattering. But he could no longer retreat. They won't allow it. The world will not allow it. You want to know if this will change Meta's direction? He asked, looking directly into one reporter's camera. A pause for a second. Yes. The crowd exploded again, not with words but with whispers, surprise, a roar that grew with every second. What does this mean? Someone shouted. Meta will take up religion? Are you creating a digital god? Have you betrayed the scientific community? Mark raised his hand, calling for silence. He didn't raise his voice, but people felt that he was about to say something important. Everything we did at Meta was always about connecting people, about expanding their capabilities. We built virtual worlds where you can be anyone, where you can explore new frontiers of consciousness. But if we can simulate any reality, why have we never asked the main question? He looked toward the student. What if faith is not in conflict with technology? What if technology can help us understand what has always remained beyond our minds? The crowd began to buzz again. You mean Meta is going to study God? Someone shouted. Mark looked straight ahead. I want to say that technology can help us understand what is on the other side of logic. Some applauded. Some looked at him like he was crazy. But the most important thing is that not a single person in this room remained indifferent. The presenter, who had been silently watching the proceedings all this time, slowly shook his head. Do you realize what you just did? Mark didn't answer. He already knew. He just changed the rules of the game. The explosion has already occurred. Everything Mark said in the last few minutes was spreading around the world at such a speed that no PR department could stop it. Heated debates broke out on social media. Zuckerberg has declared a new religious, technological era. Meta will search for God? Is this the end of traditional religion? What if he is just talking about digital intelligence, not God? Some called him a genius, others a dangerous man who wants to combine faith and artificial intelligence. But the real question that now hung in the air was much deeper. What if he really was right? Harvard, closed area for speakers. Security abruptly closed the doors behind Mark, shielding him from the crowd. The conference host paced nervously around the room, talking to someone on the phone. I don't know how to control this, he muttered into the phone. We've already sent out a press release, but the news channels won't stop. Yes, he said it live on air. Mark sat down in the leather chair and closed his eyes. He could still feel the adrenaline in his blood. This moment was the purest of his entire career. No algorithms, no digital models, no media manipulation. He just told the truth. But now the whole world wanted to know, what next? The quiet sound of footsteps caught his attention. An elderly man entered the room. He was wearing a formal but simple suit, without a journalist badge, and without a phone in his hands. His eyes looked at Mark not with condemnation, not with admiration, but with curiosity. "Are you Mark Zuckerberg?" Mark raised his eyebrows slightly. "Yes," he nodded. "Have we met?" "No, but I've been watching you for a long time." The man sat down opposite. "You said a very interesting thing, Mark. That technology can help us understand what is on the other side of logic." Mark looked at him carefully. "And what do you think about this?" The man bowed his head slightly. "I think this is either the most brilliant thing I've heard in decades or the most dangerous idea in human history." Silence. Mark felt something strange. This man was not a journalist, not a student, not a professor. He was something more. "Who are you?" Mark asked. The man looked at him with a slight smile. "Someone who wants to know what happens next." At that moment, there was a knock on the door again. "Mr. Zuckerberg, you are being called to make an urgent press statement." Mark looked at the door, then back at the man. But the chair in front of him was already empty. The man disappeared. He left no business card, no trace. Was he a journalist? A priest? Someone specially planted in the conference? Mark didn't know, but his words continued to ring in his head. This is either the most brilliant or the most dangerous idea in human history. What did he mean? Conference lobby, press area, dozens of cameras, hundreds of faces, flashes that hit right in the eyes. "Mr. Zuckerberg, do you have anything to say after your words at the conference? Do you really plan to combine technology and faith? Do you think that artificial intelligence can become a replacement for God? Your words have caused protests. There is already a reaction from the church, scientists and politicians. What will you answer? Protests?" Mark tensed. He didn't expect this. "What kind of protests?" he asked calmly, turning to his PR specialist. A woman in a business suit, with a headset in her ear, leaned toward him, speaking quickly but with restraint. "There are already statements from several religious leaders. The Catholic Church refuses to comment, but some pastors have already called your words an alarming sign. At the same time, major scientific communities are criticizing you for deviating from the scientific approach. So I just said that faith and technology can coexist, and now it has a threat?" The woman smiled nervously. "Welcome to the real world." He looked at the crowd. People were waiting. We were waiting for his next move. And so he takes a step forward. "Thank you all for your attention." The hum died down. "I see that my words have caused a great resonance. This is good. It means that we are finally discussing the issues that we were afraid to talk about." "Are you going back on your word?" someone shouted. Mark chuckled. "No, a new wave of camera flashes. But I want to clarify. I wasn't talking about religion. I was talking about searching, about how technology hasn't answered all the questions yet, about how believing in something bigger is not a weakness, but a strength. So Meta will now be engaged in spiritual searches?" Mark looked straight into the camera. "Here it is, that very moment. Choice. Meta has always been about search. Only now this search goes beyond algorithms." Explosion. The crowd began to buzz. Some started to applaud. Some started to shout. Some were already running to the phone to write another article. But Mark saw the main thing. The student who asked that very question looked at him and smiled. He understood. At that moment, one of the guards quietly said to him, "They are waiting for you. There are people who want to talk to you. Urgently." Mark turned slowly. "Who?" The man leaned closer. "Those who think you've gone too far." And Mark realized this conversation was just beginning. Mark took a step forward. In front of him stood security. Behind him was a crowd of journalists and students who were still shouting questions. But now everything has changed. He wasn't just a speaker at a conference. He wasn't just the head of a company. He became a symbol of a conflict that was bound to break out sooner or later. Science versus faith. Logic versus intuition. Reason versus the unknown. And now the whole world was looking at him. Closed room. Unknown people. He was led through a long corridor, hidden from cameras and prying eyes. There were several people inside. Officials, businessmen, representatives of religious organizations, scientists. And they all looked at him differently. One with suspicion, another with hatred, the third with anxiety, and someone with interest. "You've gone too far, Mark." The words belonged to a tall man in a formal black suit. The voice was cold, almost mechanical. "I just asked the question that everyone is afraid to answer," Mark said calmly. "No, you did more. You made people think. You created a problem that is now impossible to control." Mark chuckled. "Should questions about faith be controlled?" They must stay within the framework, another man intervened. You have no right to mix technology with something that cannot be measured. Mark narrowed his eyes. Why? Because it scares you? A heavy silence fell over the room. We are not here for philosophical conversations, the third man said firmly. Do you know that your words have caused protests? That people are taking to the streets, arguing, demanding explanations? What scares you more, protests or the fact that I might be right? This phrase cut through the air. One of those present stepped forward. He was elderly, with intelligent but tired eyes. Tell me, Mark, do you really believe that technology can lead us to God, or are you just playing with fire? Mark paused, and then he said something that no one expected. What if God is technology? The room froze. If we have created a metaverse full of consciousnesses, what prevents us from imagining that we ourselves live inside the code? That our reality is not an endpoint, but only a fragment of a more complex system? Are you saying that we are just a program? I'm saying that the line between the created and the natural may be thinner than we thought. One of those present suddenly slammed his fist on the table. You're playing with billions of lives, Mark. Your words can change the perception of reality. Mark exhaled slowly. I'm not forcing anyone to believe. I'm just saying that we can no longer ignore these questions. The world outside waited for an answer. Hundreds of cameras, thousands of people, millions of viewers in front of the screens. And Mark was in front of them again. He looked into the hall, and suddenly I realized that I was afraid. But fear was not weakness. Fear was responsibility. He took the microphone. The hum died down. I was asked if I believed in God. Silence. I said I believe. But now I ask you, are you willing to accept that the truth may be more complex than we thought? The crowd froze. Some looked at him with admiration, some with hatred, some with real horror. But the most important thing is that he could no longer stop. He no longer belonged to himself. Now he was the voice of a new world, and this world was just beginning.